Tonight on Reporting Scotland, a juror who took a £3,000 bribe during a drugs trial has been jailed for 6 years. Her case made Scottish legal history. 2 men have been arrested after a woman died in Kirkintilloch yesterday. It's understood Jennifer Morgan was stabbed. The mother of Moira Jones, killed in Glasgow 10 years ago, has welcomed a multi-million-pound grant to help families of the victims of crime.
You could go mad. It was awful. And it's often, it's still awful. You learn to cope. I don't think that much of it lessens or goes away.
Also in the programme, all smiles in the Celtic camp this weekend. They've a chance to win their 7th league title in a row. And some of it's really big and some of it's out there. It's Glasgow's Festival of Contemporary Art. Good evening. A juror has been jailed for 6 years after being found guilty of taking bribes. It's the first prosecution of its kind in Scotland. Catherine Leahy was the spokesperson on a jury which acquitted a man accused of money laundering and drugs trafficking. Rival Alderson reports.
Catherine Leahy, who's 62, was investigated after police received a tip-off following the completion of the High Court trial in which she'd been a juror. Police bugged her house in Glasgow's Springboig. They had evidence she'd received 4 payments into her bank accounts, totalling almost £3,000 shortly after the end of the trial she'd been hearing. The recorded conversation she had with her son provided, the judge said today, overwhelming proof of her guilt. Police say being given rare permission, sanctioned by Scotland's senior judge and senior prosecutor, to bug Leahy's house was crucial.
It was a very essential bit of the whole investigation, but there were other aspects which backed up what came from that piece of evidence. It did throw up a lot of challenges. It's, as far as I'm aware, this is the one and only investigation that we've had of this type within Scotland, and the only time anybody has ever been convicted of a crime of this type.
The judge, Lord Turnbull, said a jail sentence was inevitable because Leahy was guilty of conduct that is such a serious breach of the public duty that forms a cornerstone of our freedom. Graham Clark was acquitted of drug trafficking and money laundering after a 5-month trial in which Leahy was the jury spokesperson. Mr. Clark's wife was convicted of mortgage fraud. Senior lawyers say Leahy's 6-year sentence was inevitable, as courts were bound to take any suggestion of jury interference seriously.
Trial by jury is one of the most important pillars of our justice system, and is something that should be fiercely protected. And in any circumstance where that is compromised by a juror having been found guilty of taking a bribe in this particular case, then that has to be treated with the utmost seriousness.
As Leahy begins her jail term, prosecutors are considering asking for a retrial of Mr. Clark under double jeopardy legislation. The law says someone who's been acquitted can be brought back to court if jurors or the judge in the original trial have been interfered with. Rival Alderson, Reporting Scotland.
A 33-year-old woman who died in Kirkintilloch yesterday has been named as Jennifer Morgan. It's believed she was stabbed. A 39-year-old man has been arrested in connection with her death. Another man, who's 32, has also been arrested in connection with the incident. Katrina Renton reports.
Forensic officers search the home in this quiet street as they try to find out what happened here yesterday. Police believe Jennifer Morgan's death was suspicious, which is why it is being treated as a murder inquiry.
At around 20 to 4 yesterday afternoon, police were called to the property here. They say they found the body of the 33-year-old woman in the back garden. A neighbour told me that she'd only moved here 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this is what he witnessed yesterday.
My daughter's a nurse, so she ran over to check, see what was happening, checked her pulse, and obviously found out that she didn't have a pulse, you know. It's quite a wee village. We've kind of used to this being a wee quiet village, and this kind of thing never happens, you know. It's unusual for this place. It's very quiet.
A post-mortem is due to be carried out to establish how Jennifer Morgan died. It is believed she was stabbed. The inquiry continues. Katrina Renton, Reporting Scotland, Kirkintilloch.
There have been furious exchanges at Holyrood over claims of links between political parties and the controversial data company Cambridge Analytica. The First Minister faced Tory claims of hypocrisy after it emerged that a consultant working for the SNP had met the company in 2016. But Nicola Sturgeon argued that it was the Conservatives who were mired in links to the firm. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
Forewarned, Nicola Sturgeon knew she might be questioned about the SNP and Cambridge Analytica, the company accused of harvesting online data to influence the US election.
The company itself.
After all, she'd seen this earlier in the week, the SNP MP Brendan O'Hara closely questioning Brittany Kaiser, a former director at the consultancy. Ms Kaiser's chief response?
I do know that we have been in pitches and negotiations with UK parties in the past, such as the SNP.
Oh, well, allow me to follow that particular stag into the forest then.
As that stag hunt continued, the SNP said a consultant for the party held one meeting with Cambridge Analytica after they pitched for business in 2016, but that nothing ensued. That didn't stop Ruth Davidson of the Tories.
Now, I know that the SNP have raised sanctimony to an art form, but what stinks here is the reek of hypocrisy. Because when it comes to the dealings that others have had with Cambridge Analytica, the First Minister and her party have spent weeks demanding full transparency. Yet when it comes to the SNP, it took a whistleblower giving evidence in a parliamentary committee before facts even began to be dragged out into the open.
The First Minister listed extensive contacts between Cambridge Analytica and individual Tories and between the parent company and the UK government.
I think it's the Conservative Party and the UK government that's mired in links to Cambridge Analytica and its various associates. The SNP's never done any work with them because, unlike the Conservatives, unlike the UK government, when we met them, we realised they were a bunch of cowboys. If only Ruth Davidson's colleagues had done the same.
Ruth Davidson.
Ruth Davidson said the Scottish Conservatives had no contact with the company. The First Minister declined to name the individual who acted for the SNP, warning of a witch hunt, and she accused the Tories of concocting baseless smears. Ryan Taylor, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
The mother of a woman murdered in Glasgow 10 years ago has welcomed new funding to support the families of crime victims. B. Jones, whose daughter Moira was killed in Queen's Park, said the Scottish Government grant would prevent people feeling neglected when they need help. Andrew Black reports.
Moira Jones was 40 years old when she was raped and murdered in Glasgow's Queen's Park in May 2008. Her killer, Slovakian Marek Harchar, was later jailed for life.
Darling, darling Moira, we were so proud of you. We will always be so proud of you.
10 years on, Moira's mum finds the memories of what happened just as distressing.
You could go mad. It was awful. And it's often, it's still awful. You learn to cope. I don't think that much of it lessens or goes away.
Hi.
Justice Secretary Michael Matheson's now giving more than £13.5 million to the charity Victim Support Scotland. That will help fund dedicated caseworkers for the families of murder victims who often struggle to cope with the justice system.
Having their own caseworker who work by their side all the way along takes that pressure off and lets the caseworker do some of that negotiation on their behalf.
B. Jones has spent years campaigning for better services and welcomed today's news.
A victim's family will have that one-to-one caseworker from early on till virtually as long as they need it.
Moira's mum now hopes her daughter's legacy will be to help other families who go through the same thing. Andrew Black, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
A man wanted in connection with the disappearance of a Western Bartonshire woman in Spain has been arrested at Heathrow Airport on a flight from South America. Lisa Brown, originally from Alexandria, was reported missing in November 2015. Metropolitan Police have confirmed that 35-year-old Simon Corner was detained on a European arrest warrant at the request of Spanish police. He's expected to be extradited to Spain within 10 days. Lisa Brown was 32 when she disappeared from Cadiz after failing to pick her son up from school. Drugs worth more than £200,000 were recovered after a serious fire at an Aberdeen tenement. Police Scotland said the heroin recovery was made following the execution of a search warrant in Torry yesterday. The warrant was obtained after officers were called to the same building due to a fire. 42-year-old Scott Simpson appeared at Aberdeen Sheriff Court today in connection with the seizure. Calls are being made for the closure of the Pinnies fish factory in Annan to be put on hold after it emerged that the parent company, Young Seafood, is up for sale. The Scottish Secretary and Scotland's Business Minister met the boss of the seafood company today to discuss the possible loss of 450 jobs from the processing plant. Well, our Business and Economy Editor, Douglas Fraser, joins me now. Douglas, does the sale of the whole company change its plan to close the plant in Annan?
Well, it has become more complicated. I mean, we knew that the Pinnies plant in Annan was facing closure with those 450 jobs likely to go. The company started that statutory 45-day consultation period just this week. Why is it doing that? Well, it doesn't reckon that Pinnies is financially valuable dealing with the contract that it's had supplying Marks and Spencer's, so it's decided to move some of that to Grimsby and to give some rival firms, including some in Uddingston, Lanarkshire, and also in Arbroath, some of the work going there too. What we learned today is that the owners of Young Seafood are putting the whole company up for sale. Who are the owners? Well, it's a private equity fund, Lion Capital. Now, private equity, their job is to buy, to get more efficiency out of the company, to increase its value, and then to sell it on. And that seems to be what they're wanting to do now. There have been rumours about it for some months. The buyer may be Mitsubishi, not just in engineering, but in fish as well. Now, does this mean the closure of the Annan plant may be put on hold, which is what these politicians have been arguing today? We can't be sure from what's been said today, but it doesn't look like it. The management talk about helping the workforce, but very much in the context of moving the plant on and somebody else being able to help the workforce.
Does this leave uncertainty, though, for other Scottish parts of the business?
Well, some uncertainty, given that it's been put up for sale. This is a tough business, very tight margins. I mean, Young's had turnover of more than £500 million last year, but made a profit of £12 million. So these are tight margins. The other plants owned by Young's in Scotland are in Livingston, in Fraserburgh, and another plant in Annan, where they make scampi. The Northeast plant in Fraserburgh was likely to be closed. They were consulting on that not long ago. They changed their mind. That's one source of hope that there is for those campaigning in Annan.
Douglas Fraser, thank you very much. The UK Defence Secretary says there's an increasing threat from submarines in the North Atlantic. Gavin Williamson was speaking at RAF Lossiemouth as he marked the start of construction of a £132 million facility for the new maritime patrol aircraft. The first of the Poseidon aircrafts is due in 2020. A woman who was hit by a car in the West End of Glasgow has died. The 24-year-old Glasgow University student was struck by the Ford Fiesta in University Avenue on Tuesday afternoon. She died in hospital earlier today. The Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson has been included in Time magazine's list of 100 influential people in the world. She's praised in the US publication by the Scottish-born historian Neil Ferguson. The list also includes Donald Trump, Prince Harry, and showbiz stars like Nicole Kidman and Jimmy Kimmel. A spokesman said Ruth Davidson was honoured, but her focus remained on her job in Scotland. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 17 minutes, I can't count, to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. A juror has been jailed for 6 years after being found guilty of taking bribes, the first prosecution of its kind in Scotland. And still to come, some of it's really big and some of it's out there. It's the Glasgow International Festival of Art. MSPs have backed calls for changes in the law that would allow a drugs consumption room to be set up in Glasgow. In an effort to tackle a rising problem, health officials in the city want to establish an area where vulnerable addicts can inject drugs without being arrested. But the Home Office, who control drugs legislation, have insisted that any such facility would be illegal. Stephen Godden reports.
It's not a unique problem. Glasgow has a hardcore of addicts on the streets injecting regularly. Most are out of reach of treatment. The number of deaths and HIV cases are rising. Health officials want to follow an approach taken in Copenhagen and 70 other cities, setting up a so-called fix room a supervised area where addicts can inject drugs without fear of arrest,
We give to them the needles,
while offering access to medical support and counselling. But the law prevents the council-backed plan becoming reality.
Drug consumption rooms, they are not a panacea, obviously, in terms of providing all the answers, but they certainly would help with this group, and the evidence across the globe supports that very, very strongly.
With drugs legislation reserved to Westminster, the Home Office insists that any drugs consumption area would be illegal. Scotland's Lord Advocate has told ministers that his hands are effectively tied, leading the Scottish Government to call for the power over drugs laws to be devolved here to the Scottish Parliament.
All of this leaves me wondering just how much more evidence in support of these facilities does the Westminster Government require before it will act, and how many more people will need to die before they agree that these facilities could save lives.
Annie Wills. But in the ensuing debate, a consensus on fixed-room proposals was lacking.
What we are talking about here is setting up a place where we can put people who are so far removed to say, there you go, there's a place to go and take heroin. Is that like saying, we've forgotten about you?
Support from other parties was narrowly focused.
Nobody in this chamber, I would suggest, is seriously suggesting that one injection room in one part of one city is an adequate response to Scotland's very serious drugs problem. But they may well have a part to play.
A facility where doctors prescribe and administer heroin for addicts is a proposal within the current law that's being actively pursued in Glasgow. The change needed to go further now has the backing of MSPs, but is still a long way from reality. Stephen Godden, reporting Scotland.
A campaign group say the average speed cameras on the A9 between Inverness and Dunblane have made the roads safer. They were switched on in October 2014 in a bid to cut the number of fatalities. The A9 Safety Group has compared accident statistics from the first 3 years with the 2011 to 2013 figures. They say 10 fewer people were killed and 96 fewer injured in crashes. A 49-year-old man from the Borders has been fined £1,000 after offering a tiger's head and leopard and tiger claws for sale online. Richard Wales admitted contravening regulations to protect endangered species from illegal trade. Football, and as Celtic close in on a 7th successive league title, their manager Brendan Rodgers says he couldn't be happier. A win over Hibernian on Saturday will be enough to win the Premiership with 4 games to spare. But as David Curry reports, a former Celtic favourite is determined to make sure that doesn't happen.
We are at what's been described as the business end of the season, and for Celtic, business is booming. They're just 1 win away from their 7th consecutive top-flight title.
Big chance to do it on Saturday, so we've prepared well this week, and hopefully we can go and finish the job and get the title done.
And he left Candias for dead. That's a bad touch, a dangerous touch, and it's punished by Callum McGregor. It's 2-0 Celtic.
So everybody's excited, ready to go as well. So off the back of a good result at the weekend, then the confidence is high, and we want to go and try and finish it off.
Beating Hibs at lunchtime on Saturday will do it. They're managed by the man who led Celtic to the first 3 of the 6 in a row titles they've won.
You know, it's important that I focus on my club, and yeah, we're playing Celtic, and I've seen many title celebrations before, but I don't want that to happen on Saturday. If that's the case, then it means we've got beat, so I don't want that, obviously.
If Celtic aren't champions this Saturday, 3 points from any of their last 4 games will ensure it, allowing them to focus on the Scottish Cup final against Motherwell and the chance to round off a domestic trophy treble for the 2nd season in a row.
We're bordering on history making in relation to it never been done before. But the reality for myself and the squad, we just think about being our best that we can be in training, and then looking to take that into our games, and let's see where it takes us.
David Curry reporting Scotland at Celtic's training centre in Lennoxtown.
Scottish Athletics have announced that their Director of Performance, Roger Harkins, is leaving. The news comes after Scottish Athletics won 5 track and field medals, including this silver for Ailey Doyle at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. That was their best haul in nearly 30 years, but Harkins says now is the right time to step down. The only football club in Britain with a 100% league record say they have ambitions to join Scotland's top leagues in the next few years. Kelty Hearts moved from junior to senior football last summer, and they're on the brink of promotion in their first season. But they're already looking beyond the Lowland League. Brian McLaughlin has more.
This is Kelty, a small former mining town in Fife, where the local football club is the centre of attraction.
For almost 40 years, Kelty Hearts had a great tradition in Scottish junior football, but 12 months ago they made the decision to relinquish their junior licence and try and force their way into the Scottish Professional Football League. But why?
We've always had an ambition, we've always been a group of ambitious people. We feel that the club, the size of the village is getting bigger. We feel that it's where the club want to go. We've had a successful time in the juniors and we've lived every minute of it. However, the time is right to become a senior club and move on.
And in former professional Thomas Courts, they have a young manager who says the club have the attributes to be a success.
I think for us as a club, we pride ourselves on being humble, we pride ourselves on kind of earning the right to be successful. So whilst there is limitless potential, I don't really want to put a limit on that for the club, because I believe that the way that we operate here is to a very, very high standard, and I think the players that we have currently are scalable with where this club could eventually go.
Over £7 million has been invested by the council and local businesses in recent years in enhancing facilities in the town, a fact not lost on one previous manager.
The progression they've made has been fantastic, and to go the next step is a tremendous achievement. But if you study the structure and the way they handle their business here, and the structure, the financial structure they've put in place, it's a terrific project.
This week Kelty made it 22 wins in 22 league games. So for Kelty Hearts it looks as if the only way is up, with the pathway eventually leading to the Scottish Professional Football League. Brian McLaughlin reporting Scotland, Kelty.
One of the biggest celebrations of contemporary art begins in Glasgow tomorrow. GI, the Glasgow International Festival of Art, features the work of 268 artists in 78 venues. Also includes one of the largest ever artworks on the site of a disused gas purifier shed. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean reports.
This part of Glasgow is an ever-changing landscape. But in its midst, something new is taking shape.
Well, this is a site I know for a long time, actually, because I have a studio here in the East End.
Artist Mick Peters has transformed this former gas purifier shed into a brand new artwork.
You get a lot of funny looks from people waiting the red traffic lights just out there, but it's the thing that, you know, you've brought something out of an environment that might feel kind of inaccessible, a bit elitist. You know, you've put a thing that everybody can see. There's no rules about how you come to see it. You know, it's freely accessible. You can kind of just walk past it.
That's been GI's motivations as it first began more than a decade ago, with work popping up across the city. Remember this inflatable Stonehenge?
Having worked in museums myself in the past, and sometimes I think it can be a barrier coming actually into the building, and there's something brilliant about working in a festival where you really open up the city itself as a kind of a space for art.
GI's international standing hasn't gone unnoticed. Today the Scottish Government announced it's eligible for Expo funding to promote and extend international work. And for those who've grown up with this festival and now find themselves making work there, it's an exciting prospect.
So used to hearing about all these really world famous artists and thinking, oh, I'll never kind of reach that sort of stage, but I feel like GI's been something that it gives you a kind of platform to get up to the next stage of kind of becoming known across your own city.
And while the gas shed may be the biggest work, there are plenty more to see over the coming 18 days in 78 locations across the city. Pauline McLean reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Timeline's over on BBC Two at 7:30 tonight. Shireen and Glenn can tell us what's coming up there.
Tonight, with major chains facing closure or uncertain futures, how do we stop the decline of the high street?
Renewed debate about whether Scottish stereotypes like the groundskeeper Willie character from The Simpsons are funny or offensive.
And swimming sensation Duncan Scott will be here with all 6 of his Commonwealth Games medals.
That's Timeline, 7:30, BBC 2 Scotland.
So, Chris, what's happened to that heat wave they're bragging about in England?
Well, it's still there and it's staying there, Sally. 29 degrees, warmer than the Bahamas, but I know where I'd rather be. Thank you. Hello there. It's not been too bad today. Some lovely warm sunshine for some. This was taken in Aberdeenshire. Blue skies there, 21 Celsius here, but elsewhere some fairly stubborn cloud and just 10 degrees on the Solway coast with low cloud. But that cloud continuing to melt away, and whilst many of us will have had fairly cloudy, grey skies for a good part of the day, it's now brightening up and there will be some lovely spells of late sunshine. Great couple of photos there from one of our weather watchers in Ayrshire. So tonight, largely dry with some clear spells. Still that low cloud, though, around the Solway coast and perhaps a few showers just edging in towards the Western Isles. But most of us, a dry night. Temperatures around 6 to 9 Celsius, so a touch cooler than last night, but nothing desperately cold. So to tomorrow, and it's a dry start away from the northwest, where we'll see those showers edging in across the Highlands and Islands up towards the Northern Isles, perhaps a few further east as well at times. Elsewhere, though, dry and bright, and on balance, a better day than today, because whilst it will be a touch cooler, the sun will be with us earlier on, so probably making things feel a good bit better. Temperatures in the central belt around about the mid-teens, towards the east, anything up to around 17 or 18. There's that rash of showers anywhere really from Skye eastwards over towards parts of western Aberdeenshire, up through Caithness and Orkney, and perhaps 1 or 2 light showers passing through Shetland at times too. And around the northwest coast there will be a fairly fresh breeze. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, lovely late evening sunshine, and then a dry, clear and cold night. The weekend, well, we had high hopes. High pressure now somewhat fleeting, I think, but generally on Saturday, dry and bright, showers developing later on. Those could be thundery and staying unsettled for Sunday. So here's how it plays out. Saturday gets off to a dry, fine start, plenty of sunshine around, but the showers will start to work their way up from the south, and through the afternoon we'll see 1 or 2 of those. Could be heavy at times, temperatures around about the mid-teens. Sunday, low pressure takes over, and that means fairly unsettled fare, still a number of showers and some outbreaks of heavy rain at times. Here's the detail. You can see fairly unsettled picture. Temperatures still in the mid-teens, but there will be some torrential downpours, perhaps with the odd rumble of thunder at times too. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks so much, Chris. A reminder now of tonight's main news. A juror has been jailed for 6 years for taking bribes. It's the first prosecution of its kind in Scotland. Catherine Leahy was the spokesperson on a jury which acquitted a man accused of money laundering and drugs trafficking. The Queen has asked Commonwealth leaders to appoint Prince Charles to succeed her as their head. The role is not hereditary. The 53 leaders are expected to make a decision on the succession on Friday. Now that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.